Have you ever wondered why your shoulders instinctively tense when a door slams down the hall, or why you find yourself crossing your arms tightly in a room full of strangers, even when you feel perfectly safe? We like to believe we are the masters of our own movements, that every gesture and every tilt of the head is a conscious choice made in the present moment. But there's a silent architect working deep within the shadows of your subconscious, a master weaver who began designing your physical responses long before you ever uttered your first word. This architect is your history, specifically the echoes of your childhood. Welcome to Behind Behavior, where today we are venturing into the labyrinth of the human psyche to uncover a secret that your body has been keeping for decades. We are exploring profound and often invisible ways that childhood trauma shapes your body language today. If you'd ever felt like a passenger in your own skin, or if you are ready to reclaim the narrative of your own physical presence, I invite you to subscribe and join our community of seekers as we peel back the layers of the human experience. The mystery of why we do what we do often lies in the concept of the habit loop, a neurological pattern that governs much of our lives. When we speak of childhood trauma, we aren't just talking about memories. We are talking about the biological installation of habits that were once necessary for survival. Imagine a child living in a home where the atmosphere is unpredictable. To that child, a raised voice or a heavy footstep isn't just a sound. It is a trigger. The brain, in its infinite wisdom and desire to protect, creates a routine. The child shrinks, minimizes her physical presence, and avoids eye contact. The reward is safety, or at least the avoidance of conflict. Over years, this loop, trigger, routine, reward, becomes etched into the neural pathways. By the time that child becomes an adult, the shrunken posture is no longer a choice. It is a baseline habit. This is why habits are so notoriously difficult to change. They aren't just things we do. They are who we become to survive. To understand how to rewire these deeply embedded physical habits, we must first look at the science of the brain. Our basal ganglia, the primitive part of the brain responsible for habit formation, doesn't distinguish between a good habit and a bad one. It only cares about efficiency. When a child experiences chronic stress or trauma, the nervous system enters a state of hyper-vigilance. This isn't a psychological state. It is a physiological one. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, becomes enlarged and hyperreactive. It begins to send signals to the rest of the body to prepare for battle or flight at the slightest provocation. This constant state of readiness manifests in what we call armored body language. You might notice someone who always keeps their jaw clenched, their neck muscles taut, or their hands balled into fists. These are not just muscular tensions. They are the physical manifestations of a brain that is still waiting for the other shoe to drop. The tragedy of these habits is that they often outlive the environment that created them. You may be in a loving relationship now or a stable career, yet your body language still screams danger. This is the core of the mystery we are unraveling today. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. If you find yourself constantly checking the exits in a room, or if you struggle to maintain eye contact because it feels like a threat rather than a connection, you are witnessing the ghost of a survival strategy. These behaviors were once your shield. The problem is that a shield, while protective, is also heavy. It prevents you from reaching out, from being vulnerable, and from experiencing the full spectrum of human connection. So, how do we begin the process of implementation? How do we move from being a victim of our past habits to being the architect of our future? It begins with a radical act of observation, without judgment. Science tells us that the first step in changing any habit is awareness. You cannot change what you cannot see. We must become detectives of our own bodies. When you are in a meeting and you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, don't push it away. Instead, ask yourself, what is my body trying to tell me right now? What is the trigger? Is it the tone of a colleague's voice? Is it the way someone is standing over you? By identifying the trigger, you begin to deconstruct the habit loop. You move the behavior from the dark, automatic depths of the basal ganglia to the bright, analytical light of the prefrontal cortex. This process requires immense patience and consistency. We are not looking for an overnight transformation. The neural pathways of trauma were built over years of repetition. They will not be dismantled in a day. We must adopt a progressive plan. Think of it as a body language implementation strategy. Start small. If your habit is to look at the ground when walking, challenge yourself to look up for just 10 seconds. Notice how it feels. Does it feel exposed? Does it feel powerful? This is a routine part of the habit loop. We are introducing a new routine to replace the old one. But for a habit to stick, there must be a reward. The reward in this case is a feeling of agency, the realization that you can choose how you occupy space. As we go deeper into this exploration, we must address the concept of the frozen body. Many survivors of childhood trauma exhibit a body language characterized by stillness. They move as little as possible, as if trying to blend into the wallpaper. This is a freeze response that has become a permanent physical state. In social settings, this can be misinterpreted as being cold, distant, or uninterested. In reality, it is the body's way of being invisible so as not to draw fire. To break this habit, we use the science of neuroplasticity. We must teach the body that movement is safe. This can be done through gentle somatic practices, stretching, dancing alone in your room, or even just focusing on the sensation of your feet on the floor. We are teaching the nervous system that it is no longer in the then and there, but in the here and now. Another common manifestation is a fawn response. This is a body language of extreme compliance. You might find yourself nodding excessively, smiling even when you are unhappy, or tilting your head in a way that signals submissiveness. This was a habit developed to appease an unpredictable caregiver. While it might make you seem nice or easy to get along with, it is actually a denial of your own boundaries. The habit loop here is trigger, conflict, or potential anger, dash, routine, submissive body language / fawning, dash, reward, de-escalation threat. To change this, you must practice neutrality. Practice standing with your weight evenly distributed. Practice a level gaze. It will feel terrifying at first because your brain associates this posture with danger. But with consistency, the brain learns that the world did not end because you stood your ground. We must also be wary of the trap of unrealistic expectations. You will have days where the old habits return with a vengeance. You will have days where you feel small, where your jaw aches from clenching, and where you cannot meet anyone's eyes. This is not failure. It is part of the process. The goal is not to become a perfect communicator with perfect body language. The goal is to develop the intelligence to recognize when you have slipped back into your old armor and the compassion to gently ask yourself to step out of it. This is the essence of emotional intelligence, the ability to bridge the gap between our internal triggers and our external actions. Let's talk about the science of the vagus nerve. This is the longest nerve in your body, and it acts as the highway between your brain and your organs. It is the key to the rest and digest system. Childhood trauma often leaves the vagus nerve in a state of low tone, meaning it's harder for your body to calm down after a stressor. This reflects in your body language through shallow breathing and a lack of facial expression, known as a flat effect. By practicing deep diaphragmatic breathing, you are physically signaling to your brain through the vagus nerve that the environment is safe. This simple act can change your entire physical presence. Your face becomes more expressive, your movements more fluid, and your body language more inviting. It is a biological hack to break the trauma-induced habit of rigidity. As we move toward a practical plan for the weeks ahead, I want you to consider the 5-second rule of body language. When you feel a trauma-informed habit taking over, such as crossing your arms or looking away, give yourself 5 seconds to acknowledge it, and then intentionally change one small thing. Uncross your ankles, drop your shoulders, take one deep breath. This micro-implementation is the secret to long-term change. You are not trying to change your entire personality. You are just changing the next 5 seconds. Over time, these seconds accumulate into minutes, hours, and eventually a new way of being in the world. The mystery of our behavior is that it is always telling a story. Your body language is a map of where you have been, but it does not have to be a blueprint for where you are going. You have the power to redraw the lines. You have the power to occupy more space, to breathe more deeply, and look the world in the eye. The habits of the past were your survival kit, but you are no longer in the wilderness. You are home, and you are safe. As we conclude this journey into the depths of the mind and body, remember that true transformation is a quiet, steady flame, not a sudden explosion. It is found in the daily commitment to yourself, in the patience you show your own nervous system, and in the courage to stand tall even when your history tells you to hide. You are uncovering the patterns that have governed you, and in doing so, you are setting yourself free. If this exploration has resonated with you, if you feel a little more understood or a little more empowered to reclaim your physical narrative, then I ask you to take a stand for your own growth. Like this video, share it with someone who might be carrying a heavy shield of their own, and subscribe to Behind the Behavior. Together, we will continue to pull back the curtain on the hidden forces that shape our lives. Your journey to understanding the why behind your what has only just begun. Stay curious, stay compassionate, and most importantly, stay present in the body that has carried you through everything. Until next time, keep looking behind the behavior. Building upon the foundation of self-awareness we have established, we must now pivot toward the intricate architecture of our social interactions and how the silent signals we emit dictate the quality of our relationships. While we have explored the internal landscape of self-protection and survival, the next layer of this journey involves understanding the interpersonal feedback loop. This is the invisible dance where your nervous system communicates directly with the nervous system of everyone you meet, often before a single word is spoken. To deepen our understanding, we must look at the concept of social baseline theory. This theory suggests that the human brain expects access to social relationships to mitigate risk and minimize the effort needed to survive. When we carry a rigid or closed-off physical narrative, we are inadvertently signaling to the world that we are unavailable for this biological cooperation. This creates a cycle of isolation. Your body signals a need for distance. People respect that distance, and the resulting loneliness reinforces the belief that the world is an unwelcoming place. The anatomy of vulnerability and power in this next phase of our exploration, we examine the paradox of vulnerability. We often mistake physical tension for strength, but in the realm of human behavior, true power is found in the ability to remain soft in a hard world. When we analyze the body language of highly influential leaders or emotionally grounded individuals, we don't see armored chests or clenched jaws. Instead, we see open-loop communication. This involves exposing the vulnerable parts of the anatomy, the neck, the palms, and the torso. By intentionally practicing these open postures, we aren't just changing how others see us. We are sending a signal to our own amygdala that we are safe enough to be seen. Consider the ventral vagal state, a concept from polyvagal theory. When we are in this state, our facial muscles soften, our voice takes on a melodic quality, and our physical presence becomes an invitation rather than a barrier. This is the ultimate goal of Behind Behavior, moving from a state of defensive bracing to a state of social engagement. The script of the unspoken lets look at specific scenarios where these patterns play out. In professional environments, for example, the shielding maneuver, such as holding a coffee cup with both hands against the chest or hiding hands under a table, is often interpreted as a lack of confidence. However, we now know it is actually a regulatory behavior. To evolve, we must replace these shields with anchor points. Instead of hiding your hands, place them flat on the table. Instead of shrinking your frame, imagine a thread pulling the crown of your head toward the ceiling. These are not power poses meant to dominate others. They are alignment poses meant to stabilize yourself. Furthermore, we must address the mirroring reflex. We naturally mimic the tension of those around us. If you walk into a room of anxious people, your body will likely adopt their frantic energy. The mastery of behavior lies in becoming the thermostat rather than the thermometer. Instead of reflecting the room's temperature, you set it. By maintaining a regulated, calm, and open physical presence, you provide a nonverbal anchor for others, effectively calming their nervous systems through your own. The path to integration, as we move toward more comprehensive mastery of our physical and psychological selves, we must discuss the integration phase. This is where the knowledge of why we behave the way we do meets the daily practice of who we want to become. It involves a deep dive into interoception, the ability to sense the internal state of the body. Can you feel your heart beating? Can you sense the tension in your diaphragm before you speak? Developing this internal radar allows you to catch the defensive narrative before it manifests as an outward behavior. It gives you the gap between stimulus and response. In that gap lies your freedom. We will explore how to expand this gap through somatic tracking and mindful movement, ensuring that your body becomes a collaborator in your success rather than a silent saboteur. We are moving beyond mere body language tips into a holistic philosophy of presence. This isn't about faking a smile or perfecting a handshake. It's about the profound courage required to inhabit your own skin without apology. It's about recognizing that every flinch, every stare, and every folded arm is a piece of puzzle that, once solved, reveals a person capable of immense connection and resilience. Would you like to continue with the next segment, focusing on the specific psychological archetypes of body language and how to deconstruct them in real time? The deconstruction of archetypes. To truly master the thermostat effect, we must examine the psychological archetypes that dictate our nonverbal shorthand. Every individual operates from a baseline archetype, a default setting of the nervous system shaped by years of social conditioning and survival mechanisms. When we deconstruct these in real time, we transition from being passive observers to active navigators of human interaction. The first archetype we encounter is the fortress. This individual is characterized by physical rigidity and shielding behaviors. You will notice high shoulders, a tucked chin, and limbs held close to the midline of the body. Psychologically, the fortress is operating from a place of perceived scarcity or threat. When you encounter a fortress, the instinct is often to push or siege, to use high-energy dominance to break through. However, the integration of somatic knowledge tells us that this only reinforces their rigidity. To deconstruct the fortress, one must utilize peripheral softening. By intentionally relaxing your own gaze and adopting an asymmetrical, relaxed posture, you signal to their nervous system that the battle is non-existent, forcing them to either maintain an exhausting defense or slowly dissolve their barriers. In contrast, we have the disperser. This archetype is marked by erratic, leaking energy. They move too much, speak too fast, and their gestures lack finish. They start a hand movement and pull it back halfway. The disperser is trying to occupy all the space at once to avoid being pinned down or scrutinized. Deconstructing this in real time requires gravitational presence. You must become the heavy object in the room. Slow your blink rate. Speak at a tempo that is slightly slower than theirs. By providing a stable, rhythmic contrast, you create a pacing and leading effect where the disperser is unconsciously drawn into your slower, more regulated frequency. The nuance of micro-emissions, while much is said about micro-expressions, the flashes of emotion that cross a face. True mastery requires an eye for micro-emissions. This is the study of what is not happening. In a natural, comfortable human interaction, there's a constant echo of movement. If I lean in, you might eventually lean back to balance the space, or tilt your head in acknowledgement. A micro-emission occurs when the expected somatic response is absent. For example, if you deliver a piece of exciting news and the listener's eyes brighten but their hands remain frozen or clenched, there's a somatic dissonance. Their upper face is performing the social script, but their body is stuck in a different narrative. Perhaps envy, skepticism, or preoccupation. Recognizing these omissions allows you to address the unspoken elephant in the room. Instead of pushing forward, you might pause and ask, I sense there's a but in your mind. What are you thinking? This level of perception creates an almost psychic reputation, simply because you are reading the physical gaps that others ignore. Somatic tracking and the interoceptive gap. As we move deeper into the integration phase, we must practice somatic tracking during high-stakes moments. This is the act of observing your internal sensations without judgment. When you are in negotiation or a difficult conversation, your body will provide data long before your brain formulates a thought. Perhaps you feel sudden coldness in your hands or a tightening in your solar plexus. Most people interpret these as signals of anxiety and try to suppress them. Integration teaches us to see them as energy without a label. By tracking the sensation, noticing its shape, its temperature, and its movement, you prevent it from hijacking your external behavior. You stay in the gap. This gap is where true charisma is born. Charisma is not the absence of nerves. It is the presence of total self-awareness amidst those nerves. When you inhabit the gap, your movements become intentional rather than reactive. You no longer fidget because you are aware of the impulse to move and choose, instead, to channel that energy into a steady gaze or a grounded stance. The philosophy of the open kinetic chain. To conclude this exploration of presence, we must view the body as an open kinetic chain. In physics, this refers to a system where the end of the chain is free to move. In a psychological sense, an open kinetic chain represents a person who is physically and mentally available. When we close ourselves off, crossing legs, locking fingers, or stiffening the neck, we close the circuit. We become a closed loop, impenetrable but also incapable of receiving. To live with an open kinetic chain is to accept the vulnerability of being impacted by the world. It is a realization that your body is not a suit of armor, but a bridge. The ultimate goal of this work is congruence. This is a state where your internal reality, your verbal message, and your physical delivery are all aligned. When you are congruent, you carry a weight of authority that cannot be faked. People trust you not because of your clever words, but because your body is telling the same story as your tongue. This journey of deconstructing archetypes and mastering interoception is not a destination, but a continuous refinement. It is a practice of coming home to yourself over and over again until your presence becomes your most powerful tool of influence and connection. Would you like to continue the next segment, focusing on the environmental mastery, how to read and manipulate the physical space and objects around you to reinforce your psychological standing?